Welcome to the FF Forge. My name is Steve, and today we will be going over one target in every round of the draft. 15 rounds. Once again, I have lied to you in the title. There's going to be more than 15 guys because there are a few rounds where I could not decide on just one person. And at the end, I did look at, from round 16 and beyond, my favorite target for each position, where once again, I couldn't quite narrow that down to just one. So, let's get moving on. First up is Justin Jefferson, round one. I want Justin Jefferson, whether it's at pick one or wherever else you might luckily get him, I'll take him. I want a wide receiver over a running back to start the draft this year. It's just how things work out. I could see an argument for non-PPR standard scoring, but if you're getting any kind of points per reception, I think Justin Jefferson is your guy. It's a no-brainer for me. And that's going to bring us to the second round. Now, okay, first 2 rounds, 3 rounds maybe, pretty much everybody's a target. Like, I'll take what you give me happily for the most part, regardless of who it is. And we have Davante Adams in round 2, somebody who I haven't really spoken well of this year, but when I saw the list, this is the one guy where it feels to me like I'm not the only person that is concerned down on Davante Adams. But believe me, those concerns and everything, they're baked into where I have him ranked. It's okay. I don't think that the floor is very low for Davante Adams. One of the best wide receivers in the league. Going to get Jimmy G this year. It was a disaster for that offense last season. They also used Davante Adams in a strange way, for the most part, using him as very much a deep route receiver. Those are less percentage plays. So I think this season, especially for like full PPR scoring, you'll see a more consistent Davante Adams. That was the main thing that held him back last year, where he was the 7th best fantasy receiver via my equalized value, which is something that I will be, whenever I'm saying the 7th best or Xth best receiver or whatever position, I'm talking about my equalized value charts, which, if you're not aware, the very short of it is it's very similar to average fantasy points per game. However, it also takes consistency into account. How many weeks are they at least doing okay kind of thing. I've explained it in the past. If you really want to know in the comments, let me know. I can explain it to you there. The top bullet point there, Las Vegas, 62% of passes going to wide receivers in 2022. It's not like that's some sort of insane amount of pass work. It is on the average upper end for offenses that are pass-first offenses. So that was something that we saw from Las Vegas. They were pass-heavy. And as far as the tight end and the running back room, if anything, we should see the wide receivers receive a higher percentage than 62, 63, 64, 65. That's kind of the limit. Instead of the tight ends and the running backs, because if anything, there was a reduction of targets to be expected in that tight end room with Darren Waller leaving. Not that he played every game last season. Now, when we look at my projections from this year, he's still projected as the wide receiver 9, which is, I believe, where his ADP is for wide receivers. And I lowered his target share from the 2022 target share into my projections. He still projects really well and showed no signs of slowing down. I'm just not too concerned with Davante Adams. Main reason I picked him here, he's going behind a couple of players where I would say go ahead and get Davante Adams. You should feel pretty safe with it. That's all. Now, I worked on this video a few days ahead of time, and I worked on this slide right here for round 3, Rhamondre Stevenson, a couple of hours before news came out that Ezekiel Elliott will be joining the New England Patriots. That is not official yet, but it seems like that is what's happening. So I kind of quickly at that point maybe panicked and I can't do Rhamondre. So I actually have a second target in round 3 with another slide. But let's just go over why I liked Rhamondre Stevenson, and I do still like him quite a bit. I moved him back behind Derrick Henry in my rankings, and that was about it. The good things for him previously was Kevin Harris, Pierre Strong were the backup running backs, 2 rookies last season that haven't really proven themselves. I like them a lot. in some limited work. I believe they both did okay last year, but they haven't become any kind of threat to what we were expecting the workload for Rhamondre Stevenson to be. He was the running back 17 in 2022 with a very split workload between him and Damian Harris. And so I expected that workload to go up, and I still do expect him to have more of a workload than he had last season. In 2022, he was the running back with the fourth largest target share on his team, and he was highly efficient. So there's no reason for that team to not also have faith in Rhamondre to certain extents. Like I said, I'm still pretty darn high up on Rhamondre Stevenson, and I'm still happy to take him in the third round if I want a running back. I am now maybe a little bit more willing to go Chris Olave over Rhamondre in the third round. He had a strong rookie season last year. He was the wide receiver 20, and it was the worst year of Derek Carr's career down in Las Vegas. Now, he's going to get a reset here. We saw what happened in preseason week 1. Clearly, this team's going to win the Super Bowl. Everything looks great. Chris Olave wasn't incredibly involved on their 1 or 2 drives that they had, but look, I think Derek Carr is going to improve, and I think that he's going to be definitely better than what they had last season in aging Andy Dalton, as long as I remember that correctly. And the last thing for Chris Olave is that it's a very good schedule for the receivers. That is via myself and via Fantasy Pros website. When I refer to myself, I do go through and I do have my projections altered a little bit based on schedules. What I really look at is opportunity and efficiency the previous season against defenses, every team that they will be seeing. I look at, I think, 5 different numbers, and the only impact that is possible is if those are essentially the top 5 or bottom 5 performers defensively in that statistic. So that way, whether it's a good thing for the player or a bad thing for the player, even if defenses don't normally go from being the number 1 defense to the bottom defense, or the bottom defense to the number 1 defense, this way at least there's some built-in protection for the fact that defenses change every season. And so, but the really good ones and the really bad ones, worst case scenario, should still be middle of the league at the very least. So just a little insight into how I like to do my schedules. I will be referring to good schedules for players a few times throughout this video. Let's move on to round 4, where we have our first set of co-targets, officially at least, in Joe Mixon and Amari Cooper. Kind of depends what I need at that point in the draft. Did I go running backs early, or did I go wide receivers early? Then I'm going to go with the opposite one. As far as Joe Mixon goes, he was the running back 9 last year in 2022. He was a consistent option. He was not great in real football. I don't think that was all his fault. And right now he's going at the running back 15. He had the 7th highest target share, so when we're talking half PPR, full PPR, he's involved in the passing game quite heavily, so that's a good thing. And going back to not performing well last year, I sure hope you can hear that thunder when it goes out. They have tried, and not lightly, to improve this offensive line, and hopefully that should in turn improve Joe Mixon's work. He's been a long time good running back. Last year it was a little bit off. I think things will turn around. And it all comes down to the offense. He's on one of the best offenses, if not the best, probably, let's say, if not the second best. You know what? If not the best. Joe Burrow has better weapons to work with than Patrick Mahomes. So he's on one of the absolute best, 3 best offenses in the league, regardless of what team is your favorite team. And I like good offenses for players. It's going to give them touchdown opportunities. Last year had, with all that inefficiency and not being very great, still had 9 touchdowns. That was 14th in the league, or 14th overall for running backs. I would think that number could very well increase, but I don't think that there's a high chance of that really going down by too much unless another running back comes into the fold, just because of the power of this offense. So I'm happy to get Joe Mixon in the 4th round. Looking at Amari Cooper, He was wide receiver 18 in 2022 down in Dallas. It was kind of an off year for Dallas. Offensively, had CeeDee Lamb opposite of him. This year, he's going to have Elijah Moore opposite of him. At least up to this point in their careers, there's a definite difference in the productivity and talent level between CeeDee Lamb and Elijah Moore. So I just like the situation compared to the situation in Dallas last season a little bit better. And I have a little note there saying that it's a projection. Really, sometimes I was thinking of where I have these guys ranked more so than the round that I'm talking about getting them in. So very happy to get Amari Cooper in the 4th round if I'm looking for a wide receiver. And when I say it's a projection, I'm talking about my rankings. And I guess maybe a little bit in part taking him and feeling good about it in round 4. And it comes down to Deshaun Watson, who I think will be returning to normal. Had a good first preseason, looked better there by a lot of people's accounts. And also for him, he's never quite been a top 12 wide receiver fantasy-wise in his career. I think it's possible this season in part because of what I think should be a good team, Deshaun Watson being the main key to that actually being true. And in the past, Deshaun Watson has definitely not shied away from hyper-targeting his favorite / best offensive weapon. Not like other quarterbacks, you get your best offensive weapon the ball a lot. But I think DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller, to me, it's been a little bit of a pattern with him of hyper-targeting his big targets and making sure they get the ball plenty. Going on to the 5th round, we're looking at Kyle Pitts getting a tight end in here. Hope you can hear that thunder. I'm going to set some ambiance. And the receiver room for Kyle Pitts in Atlanta has not improved. So why not expect some of the same things for him, but hopefully better and a better offense and hopefully a better quarterback accuracy-wise. There's still some unknowns here. He's not the safest pick in the draft, but I love the upside for Kyle Pitts this year. Last season, he had the number 1 target rate of all tight ends. I don't know how to end that sentence. That's what he had. I led into that awkwardly. He's entering year 3 of being a tight end. Years 3, 4, 5 even are the breakout years for tight ends. And given the talent he is, why not be year 3? He only had 2 touchdowns last season, and that's why he performed so poorly in fantasy. Even if those touchdowns would have been somewhat normal, our opinions on Kyle Pitts, the hatred for him, or the amount of letdown for how highly people drafted him last season, it wouldn't have been as bad. It would have changed quite a bit. So I'm thinking this is going to be a better offense. There will be more opportunities for touchdowns. I'm thinking he catches more of his targets, but I don't think that he gets a whole lot less of a target share. I did lower his target share in my projections, and even with that, he's still projected as the tight end 3. And for quarterbacks like Ritter, I gave them average, slightly below average numbers for the numbers that I put into my projections. So as long as Ritter can be somewhat average, there's a good shot for Kyle Pitts to dominate this season. Okay, there's no chance you didn't hear that thunder. Let's move on to round 6 with Tyler Lockett, wide receiver of the Seattle Seahawks. He is going as the wide receiver 27. He was the wide receiver 15 last year. That's quite a big difference in where he's getting drafted compared to last season. And there are some reasons for that, but let's not write him off so quickly. One thing working in favor of all the wide receivers for Seattle is the schedule. It is a good schedule for the wide receivers. Unfortunately, I didn't take note of whether that's via the Fantasy Pros, myself, or both of us. I'm going to guess it's for both of us, considering I didn't write it down here. So there is a good schedule for the receivers. Last season, also, the tight ends had 25% of the target share. And to me, I'm not thinking, now Tyler Lockett specifically picks up more of that target share. It's just that leaves plenty of room for the rookie, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's going to be working the same area of the field as tight ends do often, especially the types of tight ends that Seattle had last season, to pick up that target share, and I don't think it really impacts Tyler Lockett's target share a whole lot. On top of all that, I think this would be a better offense. We get Geno Smith in really his second year here of his revival. They have a second-year running back who performed quite well. Then they drafted another running back, Zach Charbonnet, quite highly. And then very highly, they drafted Jackson Smith-Njigba. So there's not much reason to expect regression outside of just not having faith in Geno Smith, which is understandable. But other than that, a lot of reasons to like Tyler Lockett this season. I think he's going too late, so I am very much happy to scoop him up with where he is going. That brings us to round 7. My target's going to be Christian Kirk. We have Trevor Lawrence, his quarterback, going into his 3rd year, coming into his 2nd year in this system. 2nd year working with Christian Kirk. I like things to improve here. Trevor Lawrence, we saw in the second half of last season, is on the cusp of eliteness. He might have even performed at a fairly elite level down the stretch. He still had some of his Trevor Lawrence things. The biggest thing to me that I see that if Trevor Lawrence can fix it, I think he will be a dominant, the quarterback that he was drafted to be, is that he gets a little excited sometimes when a wide receiver is just wide open. I feel like usually when I see it happen, he gets also rolled out. And it's like he doesn't trust what he's seen, so he absolutely just bombs the ball to the receiver and then ends up sailing it right over their head. And so being more comfortable in the system, more comfortable with the speed of the game, and hopefully trusting what he's seeing on the field and trusting the fact that probably nobody's around, so give the ball a little bit of touch and he'll complete those throws. And hopefully to guys like Christian Kirk. There's plenty of room in this offense for 2 wide receivers. They did bring in veteran wide receiver Calvin Ridley, who we are all expecting to do great things, and great things for this offense as well. Like I said, there's plenty of room for him. It's a down-the-field, high passing percentage type of offense. At its best, it's a vertical offense. And I think, much like somebody else I think that we're going to be talking about, the addition of Calvin Ridley should only help Christian Kirk, because Christian Kirk, we didn't know coming into last season if he could be a number 1 wide receiver. I think he proved that he can be, but, I didn't talk about it. It was Justin Jefferson. Part of why I think he'll improve this season, or why I'd be just very comfortable with him this season, is that I think the addition of Jordan Addison should help to open things up to make that offense just a little bit better, and also not prevent defenses from absolutely shutting him down, which did happen in like 3 games or so last season. Maybe that can only happen in 1 game. And for Christian Kirk, he also got shut down by defenses who focused on him and had the players to do it, and maybe just the offense had a slight off day, whatever the case is. I don't expect that to happen as much with Calvin Ridley going on the opposite side of him. It should be a more diverse offense. Christian Kirk should be more consistent and probably still have some boom games if this offense is everything that we expect it can be. And there's room for that all to happen. He was not incredibly efficient last year. Just talked about the consistency. So those things can and should improve with a better offense. And also, according to Fantasy Pros website, the wide receivers for the Jacksonville Jaguars have the number 1 best schedule for wide receivers. So, boom. Moving on to round 8, and we have a try-target grouping here of Tua Tagovailoa, Patrick Freiermuth, and Brandin Cooks. And looking at this, I might just have to reach for one of them round 7, depending on who's on the board, so I can get 2 of these guys, or hope that one of them falls. But looking at Tua, looking at Pat Freiermuth, one thing that I really like about these 2, and why literally the wording target here makes sense for them, is that they're at the end of tiers for me, where I think that there's a drop-off after them as far as how much value they can bring to your team, and getting at the end of a tier is a very valuable thing. So as far as Tua Tagovailoa goes, it's the 2nd year in the system. He was the quarterback 10 in 2022. I think he's getting drafted as a quarterback 11, and I think that he could outperform quarterback 10 easily if he can put in a healthy season. And so, yeah, I like the upside. Should be a very good offense. Once again, and hopefully he can stay healthy. As far as Pat Freiermuth goes, second year with a rookie quarterback, now not a rookie quarterback, so that offense should improve. Looked good in the preseason so far. It's just preseason. And Patrick Freiermuth is also a third-year tight end, so expecting him to potentially improve even further from where it was. And he was the tight end 7 last season. He's getting drafted as the tight end 9, so already I think, what's the downside to drafting Patrick Freiermuth? And I talk about the year 3 breakout for Pat Freiermuth. I think there is a little bit of more room for him to get better. I don't think he has the same ceiling as guys like Kyle Pitts. I don't think he could become a Kelsey. I think there are some physical limitations to his game, but I think there's a little bit more juice that can be gotten from him through experience and just learning the game better. So hopefully we'll see that in year 3 for Pat and whoever drafts him. Then Brandin Cooks played for Houston in 2022. That was a darn not good offense, bad one. And it was his worst season since his rookie season by far. And when I say by far, I mean it was almost as bad as his rookie season. It was nowhere near close as good as every other year that he's played. And we say that because he has been around the league for a while, but don't forget, he's still 29 years old. I feel like we think of Brandin Cooks as being an old grizzly 31, 32-year-old. He's not there yet, so don't write him off. His ADP is going at wide receiver 39. He was wide receiver 40 last year, once again in Houston with that offense. He's now in Dallas, much better offense, much better quarterback. I don't see the downside to him. I don't see how he finishes roughly the same as where he finished last season. So draft Brandin Cooks with confidence in round 8, and he's somebody I might reach for in round 7. Then we go to round 9, and we have Khalil Herbert coming up, running back of the Chicago Bears. Last season, David Montgomery was the running back 27, and right now Khalil Herbert's getting drafted as the running back 37. There's a bunch of hubbub this offseason. They brought in Deonta Foreman. They drafted a rookie who was the backup to Bijan Robinson, a very not proven player who also is a very impressive player, but not proven. And I think we're just being too cautious of this whole situation. This was the second heaviest run offense in 2022. One of the most efficient running backs of the entire running back landscape last year was Khalil Herbert. So why are we thinking there's a decent chance that he's not going to be the starter? I think he will be, and I think we also saw last season that they tend, and this was actually a preseason scouting report on David Montgomery of mine, is that this offense is going to want to put out the same look a lot, so they're going to want to have the same running back out there as often as they can. I think that will be true again this season. The rookie's going to sit, learn, and be ready someday to take over. Another thing about Khalil Herbert, if you're like me, maybe you're not the biggest fan of him, but the reality is he's in a really good situation. It's the second year, too, for this offense, so you hope and expect for an offense and the team around that offense to get better in the second year as they've learned it more. And Justin Fields, somebody who could definitely take a leap, and that would just help things. So I'm pretty high up on Khalil Herbert in the 9th round. Give me all of that. Then we get to round 10, and we have co-targets here once again. Wide receiver Courtland Sutton, the Denver Broncos, and running back Devon Achane. As far as Courtland Sutton, he is going off as wide receiver 46 this season, and he was the wide receiver 39 last year. Do you remember how terrible that offense was last season? Terrible, Chuck. It makes little sense to me. They brought in a new head coach. Last year they had a head coach with 0 head coach experience. I was hopeful for it, especially being a Green Bay Packer fan myself. Hope for the success of previous coaching staff from your team. And he seems like a good guy. It didn't work out head coaching-wise. They've got a guy with a lot of experience, some Super Bowls under his belt, at least 1 Super Bowl under his belt. All I'm saying is preseason week 1 for Courtland Sutton, not necessarily for this offense, was some confirmation bias for me. I think the offense will shake off the old cobwebs and they have to be better than they were last year. They absolutely have to. And just a little icing on the cake here for Courtland Sutton. This is his 3rd year coming off of his ACL, MCL injury, so that should be completely behind him if it was hampering him in any way last season. Let's move on to Devon Achane, who I've been excited about him all season. I've been high on him all off season. I still am higher than most rankers on him, if not all, I don't know. Let's look at the situation here. What's working in favor of Davante Achane producing this season for you? Well, he's on a great offense. He's on the Miami Dolphins offense. And this is a coaching staff coming over from San Francisco who we have seen produce running back after running back after running back, and not necessarily always, maybe sometimes highly drafted running backs, but not running backs that people expected to get drafted highly usually. And here we have a guy who a lot of people thought could go in the third round. I definitely expected him to. He was my third favorite running back of this draft class. So there's another point of mine. Day 2 draft pick. It's not like they just fell into this guy. They wanted him, clearly. Spend a day 2 draft pick on him. That's not nothing. And he also brings to the table some receiving capabilities. Very good receiving capabilities and big play-making abilities. News around him in the offseason has been good so far. A lot of rumblings going in favor of him. And ultimately, we look at, most likely, I think the starter to start the season, Raheem Mostert, and then the backup there, Jeff Wilson, 2 holdovers from the San Francisco regime. What's he have working? He doesn't have experience working ahead of him, so it might take a little bit for him to take over the reins and become the legit number 1 running back on this roster. But I still think he'll get plenty of work. But he has youth and health working in his favor. Neither of those two have really had health working in their favor, and they're no longer young, and young running backs do tend to get it done quite often. So Davante Achane should be a steal for you, I think. Let's move on to round 11, where we have Rashod Bateman. And right at the bottom, I have a few. These were the next up targets to be a target for this round. It wasn't a very impressive round to choose a target from. Not to shade Rashod Bateman, because I am actually starting to get excited about him again. But it was the Philadelphia DST, Alan Lazard, Tyler Algier. All things, players and defenses I would be happy to have on my team, but ultimately, who do I think has the best chance out of them to shine and really, really help your roster? It's definitely going to be Rashod Bateman. It is a projection with him. Once again, not quite the same, but similar to Amari Cooper. We haven't quite been able to see it yet with Rashod Bateman. He's had health issues, and that's a concern. But it looks like he's going to be entering the season healthy, at least as of recording this video, so we'll see if that stands. But things are starting to turn back around and look good for Rashod Bateman. I think you can get mildly excited about him. This is going to be a high-powered passing offense. It's going to split the wide receivers out wide. It's going to be totally different than last year's offense. Might take a few weeks for it to click, but it should be good for the receivers, and I think Rashod Bateman is the wide receiver 1 when healthy on this roster. Zay Flowers might overseed him soon enough career-wise. It's possible. But between Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham, I think Rashod Bateman should be the number 1 wide receiver out of this group. All things equal, on a per-game basis, we'll say. So let's move on to round 12, where I have Devin Singletary starting to get back there in the rounds. I personally don't want to be taking a running back right about this point, but depending on your roster build, I'm going to say that very specifically, and assuming you're not in a standard format league, I think Devin Singletary could definitely outproduce where he's getting drafted and be a viable, helpful asset on your team through running backs, through bye weeks, through injuries. I look at him as a high floor, low ceiling guy. Part of the reason I look at him as a high floor guy is I've been projecting him all season. I think he has a role on this offense. And based on a comment that I found from D'Amico Ryan's head coach from earlier in this offseason, he called this running back duo of Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary a 1-2 punch. That means 2 running backs running the game. Last season, I was high up on Dameon Pierce because there was no other running back of note, at least in my opinion. Other people felt differently, ahead of him on that offense. So I knew he would be the starter, and I knew that he would get a whole lot of work and it worked out like that. I think his workload will be decreased this season. I do think Devin Singletary will be the passing downs back, the 4-minute offense kind of guy. And if you think about him in that 4-minute offense role especially, the game script for Houston, probably not going to be winning a whole lot of games, right? Probably going to be working from behind. These are all more reasons that Devin Singletary might find the field and get receptions and, of course, then fantasy points. So I think Devin Singletary is a good late-round running back to get if you're looking for, once again, high floor, low ceiling. Not expecting a whole lot of touchdowns or anything like that, but hopefully the week that you play him, he gets one of his 3 or 4 touchdowns of the season. Moving on to round 13, I feel like we look at some of those other names for the targets. This is starting to feel a little bit out of place. Romeo Doubs. And maybe it's just hopium. I don't know. And in part, it's going to depend on how hopeful you are or how much of a chance you think of success that Jordan Love has. But let's just think about it in comparison to some of the other quarterbacks that some receivers who are probably going ahead of this are going to be getting the ball from. They're going to be rookie quarterbacks. Jordan Love's not a rookie. He is going to be in his first year of starting, but he's had 3 years to sit and learn. And after 2 years, I don't think that the staff thought he was ready to go. But after 3 years, they didn't have to get rid of Aaron Rodgers. That wasn't mandatory. They still had him under contract, and I think if they didn't feel good with Jordan Love, they wouldn't have done it. But they felt good enough with Jordan Love that they wanted to hand over the torch and find out exactly what they had with him. They weren't willing to do that a year ago. Things changed. Things started to click, I think. Looking at Romeo Doubs, so we know the quarterback opportunity, it's not the worst in the league, okay? Second-year wide receiver, had some drop issues for the second half of last season. He actually dropped the ball more than co-wide receiver Christian Watson. But unlike Watson, the drop issues weren't really a big knock on him coming out of college when he's getting drafted. There were some drop issues, but not a big knock. And I think ultimately, too, when it comes to wide receivers, like the name of the game for them, the way that they made it to the NFL was by catching balls. That's something that they can do. Usually, drop issues are a short-term issue, season-long, sometimes longer than that. But I think there's a pretty good chance that that was just something that happened in his rookie season and will be a thing of the past. Another great thing for him, he's really good at getting open. He was, I think, one of the best separators last season, if I recall correctly. If I can't, please call me on that. But I believe he was one of the better separators in the NFL as a rookie. And what's a young quarterback going to love? Young, inexperienced quarterback going to love more than a wide-open receiver? Probably not much. Also, for the Packers, it's a good schedule for the receivers via me. Looking at round 14, we come to tight end Tyler Higbee, who is probably the second best receiver. I say that. I don't say wide receiver, because on a passing play, anybody who's going out is a receiver. Probably the second best receiver on this team. And you get fantasy points by catching the ball and stuff. So let's look at last season. It was a down year for this offense. It was a bad year. Cooper Kupp got injured. Matt Stafford got injured. He was the 21st tight end in 2022 via my EV rankings. A little bit better via average fantasy points per week than that, though. Maybe 16th or something like that. So he was inconsistent. And with that crappy offense, that makes sense. But looking at some of the numbers, which at least early on this season, I don't really expect to change a whole lot, because I still expect him to be the second best receiver for this offense for the time being. His target share, he was 4th in the league of all tight ends. Snap share, 4th in the league of all tight ends. Red zone targets, 7th in the league out of all tight ends. Total touchdowns, only 3. 20th in the league out of all tight ends. And his efficiency was poor, and that has to do with the quarterback not having the star wide receiver. He was basically the best receiving target on that offense, if not more so than basically. I think he was for several games last year. That was going to make it tough on a tight end to be highly efficient. I think all those things should change. I think it's a bounce back year for this offense. I think Matt Stafford has at least one more year in him of very high play before he might break down or retire or whatnot. He's had a tough career, but he's one tough cookie, and he's played through most of it up until last year. So I think he can come back and do it. A little bit concerned after, of whether he will or won't stay healthy, but he's coming into the season healthy. And in the 14th round, you could do worse, and I think he'll do better than other tight ends getting drafted ahead of him. Round 15, wide receiver Darnell Mooney of the Chicago Bears. We can go back to some of the things about Khalil Herbert, just as far as this offense. Expect it to be much better. They have more weapons, second year in the system, all of that. Now, as far as the year went for Darnell Mooney last season, his first year he was expected to be the wide receiver one of a team. In his third year in the league, give it two. That's not something that was asked of Davante Adams until year 5 or 6 for him. And I just don't think that Darnell Mooney's built to be a wide receiver one. I don't think that's really his skill set. But he's proven in the past he can be a darn good wide receiver two. And last year was the worst year of his career by far. I'm expecting going back into that wide receiver two role is going to be a good thing for him. He was still the wide receiver 36 though last season. He's going as wide receiver 63. That's a huge difference there. There's enough targets for him in this offense. His target share is not going to just disappear with the addition of DJ Moore. And when you look at how this offense operated in preseason week 1, there were some big plays that came from the line of scrimmage. And if that's going to be a part of this offense, which it very well could be, same with how Justin Fields plays football, being a rushing quarterback, these are things that are going to pull defenses up closer to the line of scrimmage. Darnell Mooney being the deep ball target that he is, and he's proven that he can be better than he was last season, where once again he was wide receiver 36 fantasy still. I mean, it could be a pretty decent year for this for Darnell Mooney comparatively to where he's getting drafted here in the 15th round. I mean, it's a no-brainer, I think, for Darnell Mooney to me. And I mean, to finish that up, obviously defenses pull up. It's a big play scenario, just waiting for Darnell Mooney several times throughout the year. Let's move on to round 16 and beyond, or undrafted guys in a 15-round draft. And we're going to start right off with Matt Stafford. Just talked about him a little bit. I think it's going to be a bounce-back year for him, and he's getting going undrafted or going very late in drafts, depending on your league. If you want 2 quarterbacks, or if you want to take a late quarterback, I think he's the perfect guy for that job. Why not? Honestly. Then we have 2 running backs, and I put my number 1 primary target over on the left side, and then the secondary one on the right side of your screen. I think I got that right. So on the left side there is Kenneth Gainwell, quite potentially going to be the number 1, kind of maybe co-number 1, but the bruising back, we'll say, whatever you want to call it, for the Philadelphia Eagles, a very, very good offense, one who's had some pretty darn good running backs. And part of the reason that he's going so late is a lot of people thought it would be Rashod Penny, and it very well might not be. And so I'm thinking, yeah, he's going to be, if that doesn't come true, you can always drop him and pick up somebody else, maybe even Tyjae Spears, who I also like a lot. And I think of Tyjae Spears as somebody who could probably quite potentially outperform Devin Singletary going in the 12th round of the draft. I think he'll have somewhat of a similar role, maybe not to quite the same extent, or maybe not until halfway into the season. But I think he's going to have a role on this Tennessee offense. I think they want to get the ball in his hands, and I think they want to change things up and get Derrick Henry off of the field, all those good things, and I think they'll be able to do that with Tyjae Spears, and he's a receiving back, so it gives them an extra element and gives fantasy football owners those sweet, sweet receiving points that are so, so valuable for guys. So I think he'll be fantasy relevant, at least at some point in the season, not too long into it. Then we come to our wide receivers who have dressed up very nicely for this video. On the left-hand side, we have Marvin Mims playing for the Denver Broncos wide receiver. With the recent injury to Tim Patrick, it's going to be easy for him to find the field. That makes it much easier for him to find the field, we'll say. And unfortunately, he has not really been able to get too involved with training camp and whatnot. but it's not some sort of major injury. So I think not too far into the season, he should be in, the third wide receiver every down, and he's a big play guy. He's going to take over that role. He is the natural fit to take over Tim Patrick's role, and I think he has the talent to do it and be very good. And then Justin Ross, another guy with a lot of talent. If it wasn't for injury concerns, he is a guy who may have gone in the first round in the 2022 draft. However, those injury concerns allowed Kansas City, yes, Kansas City is where he plays, to get him as an undrafted rookie free agent last season. And so he's all healed up. He's a little bit banged up. Again, knee, hamstring just happened today, the day of recording this. But it's not supposed to be serious, so that's good. If there's anybody that's going to come out of that offense and be the Tyreek Hill, and what I mean by that is be the other main target aside from Travis Kelce and actually give you really, really good fantasy value, it's probably him. He is the big play making kind of guy. He's like 6'4". He's a threat. He's a deep threat. And then we look out to the tight ends, and we have Jake Ferguson on the left, Dallas Cowboys tight end, second-year tight end. Looked okay in some attempts last year, but I think he's a natural fit for this offense. Fits like a glove into that tight end position for them. Is a pretty highly touted tight end too. It's not like he was taken really late in the draft or expected to be taken later than he got taken. And, I mean, the job's his. And Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy both have had fantasy-relevant tight ends most years that they've on their offenses, each of them. Then we go onto the right-hand side of there, Tyler Conklin. This is very much trusting my projections. Like, if I just made my rankings without doing any kind of projecting, I don't think Tyler Conklin would have really made my radar. But the fact of the matter is, with Aaron Rodgers coming in there, if he can get more touchdowns and do something similar to what he did last season, he will be fantasy relevant. And so there's an opportunity there for Tyler Conklin late in the draft. You could do worse as a flyer. That's all. And once again, trusting the projections on him a little bit. So there it is. Thank you very much for joining me on this video. Have yourself a great day. I will see you Saturday if you tune into the injury reports from throughout the week. Go over all of those and any big news for fantasy impacts as well, if there is big news. And I think that's it. So thank you very much. Take care. Have a good one. Bye-bye.